Power doesn't corrupt people. It reveals who they've always been. What begins as an act of blind accusation quickly unravels a web of buried truths and twisted authority. The moment you think you understand what's happening, the story shifts again. Let us know in the comments section below, what would you do if no one believed your innocence? Miss Fleming, are you refusing to comply? Rebecca's eyes, warm, brown, and unflinching, locked with the officer's. She didn't flinch, didn't twitch, didn't even blink. Her arms remained still at her sides, even as her book bag, new deep violet and half-zipped, sat inches from the cashier's counter. "And refusing," she said, her voice flat, her tone honed from years of public school drills and father-taught restraint. "I'm just waiting for you to stop assuming." The store was quiet now, not dead silent, but quiet in that way when something ugly was crawling just below the surface. The kind of silence you felt, not heard. 3 people in the line behind her shifted their weight, uncomfortable. The manager, a thin white woman with spiked blonde hair and a trembling clipboard, hovered nearby, eyes darting between Rebecca and the cop. Her name was Officer Tanley. Rebecca didn't need to know that. Her badge told her. Her face told more. 40-something, burned red around the nose from too many angry patrols in the sun. Thin lips, tight posture. Someone who'd already made up her mind before the confrontation even started. Rebecca wasn't new to this. It wasn't the first time someone tried to shrink her down to the worst headline version of herself, but today felt different, colder. "Empty the bag," Officer Tanley said again, this time stepping closer. Not a request, not even a command, just a formality, like a decision had already been signed in some unseen ledger. Rebecca opened her mouth, not to argue, but to explain. "I have the receipt." And I said, the officer's voice cut through her sentence like a bone saw, "Empty the bag." The first thing to fall out was the receipt, fluttering to the floor like a dare. Rebecca didn't break eye contact, not with the officer, and not with the small crowd now watching her like she was on display. Some public shaming, some cautionary tale in real time. Then came the calculator. A worn spiral notebook with her college essay folded into the back cover, a pack of pens, and finally, the object in question. A black and blue backpack from the clearance rack, tags still dangling. The receipt, still on the floor, read the same. Backpack, $14.99. The cashier, a young Latino boy barely out of high school, finally spoke. "I scanned it," he muttered. "I remember scanning it." Tanley ignored him. She reached down, picked up the receipt like it offended her, and squinted at it. "This could be fake," she said. Rebecca felt her throat tighten, not from fear, but from how quickly this moment was slipping out of her control. Not 2 minutes ago she was texting her mom that she'd picked up school supplies and was headed to meet her ride. Not 2 minutes ago her biggest concern was whether Spellman would like the way she phrased her volunteer work on her application. Now she was a suspect. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. "Do not reach," she told herself. Her dad's voice still echoed in her head after all these years. "Don't move unless they tell you to. Don't argue. Don't win. Just survive." Officer Tanley turned to the manager. "You called us saying you saw her conceal it?" The manager hesitated. Well, yes. I thought I saw her, but maybe it was just... Look, I just want to protect the store." That was it. That was all it took. Maybe turned into yes. Protect the store became detain the girl. Tanley reached for the cups. "No," Rebecca said. Not loud, not defiant, just... Tanley froze. "Excuse me?" Rebecca turned to the boy behind the register. "You scanned it, right?" He nodded, quickly. Yeah, I did. Tanley didn't move her hands from her belt. Then we're done, Rebecca said. You're not arresting me for buying a backpack. The silence cracked. An older black woman in the corner of the store took a cautious step forward. You should check the cameras. She didn't do anything wrong. But Tanley had already decided. Turn around, she said. And Rebecca did. Her hands went behind her back. Cold metal clicked shut on her wrists. Not once did she cry. Later, in the back of the cruiser, she counted the breaths it took before the officer spoke again. 18. You've got a smart mouth. Rebecca didn't respond. She watched the buildings roll past the window. Her high school, a church, the gas station where she'd marched with her mom 2 summers ago when the world promised things would change. It hadn't. The cruiser pulled into the station. She was marched inside, fingerprinted. Mugshot. Sitting on a bench that smelled like bleach and sweat. You get one call, someone muttered. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She dialed the number by heart. 3 rings. Then, you know what time it is? The voice on the other end asked, groggy. She didn't answer that. She said one thing. Malik, they're trying to bury me. I need you. There was a pause. Then, say no more. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Rebecca leaned back against the wall. She was still in cuffs, still afraid, still angry. But her brother was coming. And Malik Brooks didn't lose. The metal door closed behind her with a sound that was too final. Rebecca sat on the edge of the steel bench, her palms sweating despite the chill in the room. The concrete walls were painted a sterile gray, and the hume of a flickering ceiling light pulsed overhead like it was keeping time with her heartbeat. Her school hoodie now sat beside her, crumpled and stained with dirt from the floor. Her fingers twitched to pull it back on, to shield herself, but she stayed still. She'd learned early from Malik that armor wasn't always something you wore. It was how you sat, how you looked back at people who wanted you to break. The officer at the desk hadn't looked at her once in the past 30 minutes, not even when she coughed or shifted or asked for water. There were others in the room, an older man asleep in the corner, a teen boy with blood on his knuckles muttering to himself. But Rebecca? She was the only one sitting perfectly upright, as if slouching might be mistaken for guilt. Finally, a different officer stepped in, younger, eyes alert. Rebecca Fleming? She stood instantly. Yes. You're being moved. To where? He didn't answer, just gestured. She followed. Down a hall that seemed longer than it needed to be, past doors that she wasn't allowed to look through. She'd seen enough courtroom TV to know this next part wouldn't go well. First appearances. Arraignment. Words that got thrown around like people's lives weren't hanging on them. They brought her into a small courtroom where the walls were fake wood paneling and the judge sat higher than necessary behind a towering desk. Judge Calhoun. She remembered the name from flyers and yard signs during election season. She was the one who always said things like law and order and tough on crime. She didn't smile when Rebecca was brought in. No lawyer waited for her. The prosecutor, a bored-looking man with thinning hair and a coffee-stained tie, barely looked up from his tablet. Defendant is charged with theft, petty larceny from a local retailer, value of item under $20. He read like it was routine. Store manager claims visual confirmation of concealment. Officer's report corroborates incident. Surveillance footage. Rebecca didn't speak. She didn't know if she was allowed to. Do you have legal counsel present? Judge Calhoun asked, not even looking at her yet. I called my brother. He's no private counsel present, the judge interrupted. A public defender will be assigned. The words hit her like gravel in the throat. Malik would never let her face this with someone court-appointed. He was coming. He had to be. But as they brought her up to stand in front of the bench, the judge's eyes finally landed on her. scanning like she was reading a grocery list. "You're a student?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Grades?" "Mostly A's." "College plans?" "I was applying to Spelman." "Was?" the judge asked, eyebrow raised. I am sorry." Judge Calhoun nodded once, as if tallying a mark in her mind. "Noted." Then she leaned back. "Was set at $2,000. Bail is set at $2,000, 0 cents. Defendant will remain in custody unless posted. Preliminary hearing set for Friday." Rebecca's mouth parted slightly. That was 4 days away. "Your Honor," she tried, "I didn't steal anything. There's a receipt. The cashier—" "This is not the time for testimony, Miss Fleming," the judge snapped. Rebecca blinked back, the heat building in her eyes. She wasn't crying. She wouldn't give her that. She just needed to hold on a little longer. They pulled her back out of the courtroom, down another hall, and into a holding area that smelled of cold lunches and Lysol. She sat again, hands in her lap. But this time she didn't feel like armor was enough. This wasn't just humiliation. This was how people disappeared. She thought of her mom, thought of her history teacher who'd written her recommendation letter, thought of the email she'd gotten from Spelman's admissions office asking for an updated transcript. None of that mattered anymore, at least not here. She heard the door click again. Rebecca Fleming. This time, the voice made her head snap up. It wasn't bored or cold. It was tight, controlled, angry. Malik. He walked in like the air owed him something. He didn't wear a suit. He never needed one to look like he belonged in a room. Slacks, dark sweater, coat over his arm. He moved with intention, and the officer behind him seemed smaller just being in his presence. Malik looked at his sister, eyes scanning every part of her as if trying to catalog what had been taken from her in just a few hours. "You okay?" he asked. Rebecca gave the smallest nod. He turned to the officer. "Get her out of those cuffs." The officer hesitated. "She's in holding." "I said," Malik repeated, slower this time. "Get my sister out of those cuffs." It took all of 3 seconds before the keys came out. Rebecca winced as the cold metal fell from her wrists. Malik helped her up, smoothing down her sleeves with a gentleness that didn't match the storm on his face. "They're making it stick," she whispered. He didn't respond, just placed his coat around her shoulders. "You're not going back in that cell." "Worse." "Wait, what do you mean?" "I filed for immediate dismissal. They denied it. But I know this judge. I've seen her record. She pushes cases like this through so she can rack up wins for re-election." Rebecca swallowed hard. "So, what now?" Malik's jaw tightened. "Now I make some calls." She stared at him. "To who?" Malik's mouth twitched, something between a grimace and a smile. "To people who can make Judge Calhoun wish she'd retired last year." And with that, he led her out. Past the desk, past the murmuring officers, past the cameras and the eyes that had already formed opinions. Because Rebecca wasn't a case file. She was Malik Fleming's sister. It meant this wasn't over. Malik stood in the parking lot of the courthouse, phone pressed to his ear, jaw locked so tight it looked like it might snap. Rebecca sat in the back seat of his black sedan, staring down at her fingers, her wrists still ringed faintly red from the cuffs. She hadn't said a word since they left the station. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was loaded, tense like the final seconds before lightning splits the sky. No deals," Malik said into the phone, voice steady but forceful. "I'm not negotiating down from a lie. This case never should have touched a courtroom. I want an emergency motion by tonight. I'll handle the rest." He ended the call and slipped into the driver's seat. Rebecca finally looked up. "Who was that?" "My investigator," he said. "We're pulling everything. Body cam, store footage, call logs. Everything." Give me, I won't give it up. That playboy will. She tilted her head, half skeptical. You think they're just going to hand it over because you asked nicely? I don't ask nicely. They pulled out of the lot. The city passed in fragments. Buildings, billboards, street corners, all part of a place that no longer looked the same to Rebecca. Everything felt thinner, sharper, like the world was glass underfoot. They fingerprinted me, she said after a long beat. They took my shoelaces. Malik didn't look at her. They treat everyone like that. Well, not everyone. His hands tightened on the wheel. I know. When they got home, their mother was waiting in the kitchen. Janice Fleming was the kind of woman who made space shrink when she stood in it. Small in frame, but massive in presence. She didn't raise her voice when she was angry. She didn't need to. Why didn't anyone call me? She asked. Rebecca froze at the door. I didn't want you to panic, Malik said. Janice's eyes snapped to him. Panic is part of being a black mother, Malik. Don't rob me of that. It's mine to feel. I handled it. Janice exhaled through her nose. Her hands were shaking slightly. She looked at Rebecca, really looked at her, and her eyes softened. Baby, are you all right? Rebecca wanted to say yes. She wanted to be strong, but her throat caught, and instead of words, she just nodded. Janice wrapped her arms around her daughter and didn't let go for a long time. Later that evening, Malik paced the den, a stack of folders on the table beside him. He didn't sit. He never did when he was building something. Judge Calhoun's docket is a mess, he said, flipping pages. Mostly low-income defendants, majority black and Latino. 92% of cases end in plea deals. Charges stick, even when evidence is weak. You think this is intentional? Rebecca asked, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her. I don't think, Malik said. I know. He tossed a photo onto the table. Rebecca leaned forward. It showed the judge smiling, mid-handshake, with a man in a sheriff's uniform. That's the county campaign fundraiser, Malik said. Same sheriff who appointed Officer Tanley to this case. Guess who donated to her re-election campaign? Rebecca stared at the photo. So, I'm just, what, a talking point? A boost to her conviction rate? To them, yeah. But that ends now. He picked up another folder. My contact at the DOJ says they've already had whispers about Calhoun. Quiet inquiries, nothing stuck. Rebecca blinked. So we stick it. Malik smiled for the first time all day. Exactly. The next morning, Malik took her downtown. Not to the courthouse. To a quiet law office off Eastfield. A small firm with a big reach. Inside, she met two people. One was Aisha Harper, a civil rights investigator who walked like she'd been through hell and survived it on principle. The other was Peter Langston, federal counsel, graying, sharp-eyed, and known for not caring about his reputation as long as justice was served. We've seen this before, Aisha said, sliding a stack of forms toward Rebecca. Patterned discrimination masked as judicial efficiency. Same playbook, different city. Peter nodded. We'll move fast, but we need your statement, and we need it honest. Rebecca took the pen. Her hands were steady now. It'll be honest, she said, but I won't make it polite. Aisha smiled. Even better. They began building the timeline. The store incident, the cashier's statement, the footage Malik had secured through quiet pressure. The arrest report, full of vague language and half-written sentences. The judge's decision to set bail despite no criminal record, no danger to the community, and zero supporting evidence. By the end of the day, a case file the size of a textbook sat on the table. That night, Rebecca sat at her desk. She was supposed to be studying for her calculus exam. Instead, she was writing. Not for school, not for court, but for herself. She was writing down everything they said to her. Every glance, every shrug, every moment that made her feel small, as they'd tried to strip her voice in that courtroom. Now she was building it back up, brick by brick. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her classmate Naya. "Girl, you're on Reddit. Someone posted a video from the store. You are everywhere." Rebecca clicked the link. There she was, standing calm, holding her ground. The video had over 100,000 views already. She scrolled down. The comments weren't all kind. Some called her a liar. Some defended the judge. But others? She didn't even flinch. That's strength. This is why people march. Where's the justice in this? She looked up from her screen and smiled. For the first time since that day in the store, she didn't feel like a suspect. She felt like a storm. It took 7 days. 7 days from the moment she stood cuffed in a discount store to the moment the courtroom air shifted. Rebecca sat in the front row, no longer in chains, no longer alone. On her left, Malik. On her right, Aisha. Behind her, half the pews filled with people she didn't know, activists, law students, community leaders, teachers. Some had seen the video. Others had read Malik's public letter, which went viral within 12 hours of posting. All of them came to see what justice looked like when it stood up for itself. Judge Calhoun entered the courtroom with the same impassive expression as before, but this time her eyes lingered on the crowd longer than usual. She cleared her throat. The bailiff called order. The air buzzed like a taut wire. The prosecution's seat sat empty. Langston rose. "Your Honor, before this hearing proceeds, we request this case be dismissed. With prejudice, on grounds of insufficient evidence, procedural misconduct during arrest, and violations of the defendant's civil rights." Rebecca didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She just watched. Calhoun hesitated. That alone told Malik everything. She knew. The judge adjusted her glasses and leaned into her mic. "The court has reviewed the submitted materials, including body cam footage, cashier statements, and security video not originally included in the arrest report." She paused again. Rebecca could feel her pulse in her teeth. In light of the presented evidence, the court dismisses this case with prejudice. The gavel came down like thunder. The courtroom exhaled. Rebecca didn't smile. Not yet. She stood, slow and sure, and faced the bench. "Permission to speak, Your Honor?" Calhoun looked startled. "This case is closed, Miss Fleming." "I understand. I'd just like to say one thing." Malik's eyes flicked to the judge. He could already see it, Calhoun weighing whether she wanted more heat, but she nodded. Rebecca stepped forward. "You tried to bury me," she said, loud enough for the gallery to hear. "Over a backpack. A backpack I bought, with my own money, with a receipt." No one breathed. "You had a choice. You could have waited for the facts. You could have listened. But you didn't. You saw what you wanted to see. And if my brother wasn't who he is, I'd still be sitting behind bars waiting for a future I earned. You call that justice?" The judge didn't respond. Not a word. Rebecca didn't wait for one. She turned and walked out. The hallway exploded in camera flashes. Reporters shouted her name, shoved mics toward her, angled for a soundbite. Malik raised a hand, shielding her as they pushed forward. "Back," Rebecca stopped. She looked into the nearest camera and spoke with her voice steady and clear. "My name is Rebecca Fleming. I'm 17. I had straight A's before a judge tried to label me a thief. This system tried to define me. But I'm not broken, I'm not scared, and I'm not going anywhere." That was all. She turned, walked out of the courthouse, and into the light. 2 days later, Judge Calhoun was suspended pending a federal investigation. The footage that Malik's team unearthed revealed more than bias. It showed a pattern. cases with missing evidence, arrests without probable cause, minors held longer than legal limits. The justice system had mistaken fear for authority, and now it was on trial too. Officer Tanley resigned. The store issued a public apology and a full refund. Not that Rebecca needed it. The internet had already made her story impossible to ignore. Community centers invited her to speak. Schools called for her testimony. Her inbox flooded with messages from girls her age who'd seen themselves in her restraint, her rage, her refusal to disappear. And then came the letter. A thick white envelope with a gold crest and her name printed in clean, bold lettering. She opened it with both hands. It wasn't just an acceptance to Spellman. It was a full ride. Malik had walked into her room just as she finished reading. "They offered you what?" he asked, grinning. "Everything," she said. He dropped onto her bed beside her. "Good, because you earned it, not because of what happened, but because of who you already were." Rebecca looked down at the letter again. "People keep calling me brave." She tilted her head. "I wasn't brave when I was in that back seat." Malik shook his head. "Bravery isn't about how you feel, Beck. It's what you do even when you're terrified." She folded the letter carefully and placed it on her desk. "I don't want this to just be about me." Malik raised a brow. "What do you mean?" "I want to start something. For students who've been arrested, for kids who can't afford lawyers. Something real. I don't know what to call it yet, but I don't want to be a headline that fades." Malik leaned back, pride radiating from his chest. "Then don't." In the weeks that followed, Rebecca launched The Second Bell, a program that partnered with youth centers, civil rights attorneys, and educators to fight juvenile criminalization. She spoke in schools. She mentored students who'd been through the system. She made sure the story didn't stop with her. One night, a girl barely 15 showed up to a meeting. Her voice shook as she told the group how a security guard accused her of stealing lunch, how no one believed her, how her classmates started calling her Sticky. Rebecca waited until the girl finished before speaking. "You want to know what they called me?" The girl nodded. Rebecca smiled softly. "Guilty. Until I proved them wrong." She handed the girl a small button with a single word on it. Unbroken. That night, as she walked home under a sky full of stars, Rebecca looked up, not for answers, but for memory. She thought of her dad, of his quiet voice, his strong hands, and how proud he would have been to see her now, because they tried to silence her, and she turned their courtroom into a stage. She was never just the defendant. She was the revolution wrapped in a schoolgirl's backpack, and she wasn't done.